Okay, Patriots. So I know this Nigerian pastor. The last time I checked out what was going on in that church, I was with my friend from Limpopo, and his name was Tomas. We were passing by and decided to stop and enter the church. We didn't know it was a Nigerian church because we saw South African youth there with hundreds of cars parked outside the church. We entered, and we were ushered to the chairs, and these ushers were South Africans. The entire choir was South African youth. If I remember very well, this Nigerian was saying he was a Black American. The day we visited, there was a guest speaker whom we all know, David Malapo. This Nigerian guy kept on telling the congregation that he came to South Africa with nothing but because of God, he now has everything. At that time, he told the church members that the church bank balance was 1.6 million rand. And I cannot say he was lying because the interior of the church, how it was organized, and the South African youth attending, it all looked professional. There were clean toilets inside and cameras on every passage. So, Patriots, this church was indeed a million rand church. They were selling oils and all this nonsense that fake pastors sell. But something didn't sit well with me, Patriots. We are educated, but that doesn't make us clever. The youth of South Africa that attended this church weren't just poor people. These were middle-class, highly educated individuals who couldn't see the truth. As for me, I heard the Pretoria people calling the wife of this pastor Mamuruti, and that alone bored me too much. It sounded like they were somehow worshiping that crooked woman, bowing their heads when talking to these Nigerian thieves. The church, Patriots, was less than 12 months old. It was situated at the corner of Prinsloo Street and Bload Street in Pretoria. David Malapo was there as a motivational speaker that day, and I was happy to see him. But this Nigerian guy was just something else. If I remember well, when it was his time to speak, he talked about South African politics and told people to be money-wise. What fascinated me, though, was the kind of youth the church was attracting. I mean, you would expect unemployed, uneducated people seeking deliverance. But in this church, it was the opposite. I didn't go to that church again, but Thomas kept going there, and he would update me from time to time. The last update I remember from Thomas was that the church had purchased a bus, and on Sundays, it would drive around collecting congregants around the CBD. Fast forward a few years, I decided to search for information about this church because there were two things I was questioning. How, in less than 12 months, they had collected 1.6 million rand. And why was it that the church members were 100% South African middle-class youth? Now, Patriots, let me tell you something strange. When you look at a Nigerian church in South Africa, where the majority of members are Nigerians, there's no money there. But once South Africans dominate a church, they'll even sell their houses and give the money to pastors. I also visited another church in Berea where Nigerians dominated, and that church was collapsing. It was pure poverty in there. Back to this crooked pastor. A few years later, I searched about his church online and found articles saying that the pastor fled with 90 million rand. But I couldn't get the whole story as to how and why he fled. There's an article I recently read with all the details. Apparently, war has broken out in the church after its leader, Clement Ibe, allegedly swindled millions of rand from the church. Members of the church, who have organized themselves under the Church Concerned Group Task Team, wrote to the Department of Social Development in December, raising concerns about Ibe, a Nigerian who allegedly fled to the U.S. Remember, Patriots, churches are NPOs, so they fall under the Department of Social Development. In a letter penned by the task team's chairperson, Molefe Selapidi, the group alleges that Ibe and his board failed to account for the church's millions for over 20 years. Patriots, remember this church reportedly had 1.6 million rand in its first 12 months, and not a single cent came from Nigeria, but from hardworking, highly educated South Africans. They also requested that the Hawks investigate what happened to the church's finances, including a property project worth 90 million rand, allegedly registered under Ibe's company, World Outreach, without the church members' approval. Selapidi confirmed that the Social Development Department and the Hawks have been approached for assistance. In their letter to the Department of Social Development, Selapidi wrote, We believe monies were laundered to fund this, whereas our church operates principally in South Africa and engages as a community church, not an international operation. We are convinced that Pastor Clement Ivy is resolute in misusing the church's resources and siphoning funds for personal gratification. The BCC members held a special general meeting after an order from the Department of Social Development to dissolve the previous board and elect an interim one. Well-known church leader Bishop Paul Varin has been appointed to oversee the process as an administrator and mediator. Now, patriots, you will remember Bishop Paul Varin is the guy who used his church to keep Zimbabweans there, and they were even making babies inside his church. Meanwhile, there were elections in Zimbabwe, and Mugabe kept winning, while Mbeki and Varin were keeping Zimbabweans away from voting in their country. South Africans were saying, go and vote in your own country. The opposition even sent buses to pick up Zimbabweans, but they returned empty. Mugabe won, thanks to Bishop Varin. In a letter to the BCC dated 16th of March 2022, Social Development Director of Nonprofit Organizations, Luyanda Ngonyama, wrote, "The assets of the church should be protected, preserved, not sold, and not used for any purpose other than to fulfill the church's intentions. An asset register should be submitted to the Nonprofit Directorate within 7 days of receiving this notice." He further directed that all former board members and church leaders cooperate with the forensic investigations conducted by the Directorate. The Directorate will monitor the implementation of the contents of this notice and may send a delegate to observe all proceedings. You are further required to submit a progress report within 7 days to the NPO Directorate. Hawks investigator Lee Cole Dudu Mosuma declined to comment, saying she would only engage with the complainant, the BCC task team, and not the media. Now, in 2024, it looks like this Nigerian swindler has started a YouTube channel, and we're told he is in the USA, not in Nigeria. Yet, many South Africans continue to fall for this nonsense. Look at that church called Universal. It has never had a South African leader. All of them are Brazilians. And this church is collecting millions of rands from South Africans. I'm not an expert in religion, patriots, but I think even though we go to churches, we need to know how to pray for ourselves. We must trust that God can help us without the presence of a pastor. Now, foreign pastors are coming with a new strategy. They rent unused, empty factories and turn them into churches. Is this what the ANC calls foreign investors?
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, then will you get bored of killing me?
Silhouettes of you are like a taunt. Never really know just what you want. With you I don't ever feel calm. I can feel the sweat inside my palms. Play with me like cats and a string. You don't understand the pain it brings. You don't ever wanna give me wings. You don't ever wanna set me free. You know I'm addicted to you, and it's twisted you can get